Thank you. Yeah, my French is a lot better than just for counting to 10, but not enough to give a talk. But be aware, I might understand most of what you're saying when you have conversations. I would like to have a little more interaction in this talk. There will be a lot building on what Goiko said, and I would like to apply some of the things that we learned about Maria Montessori's work, which is why I'm not just going to talk to you, but invite you to be a little active. One thing that I would like you to reflect and just make a show of hands might be an information that comes in handy later. Are you a person who likes to talk while they think? Are you a person who likes to talk while you are thinking? Or are you a person who likes to think before they talk? Just keep that in mind and adjust whenever I'm inviting you to participate, and adjust accordingly. I'm a trust artist. I work with trust. I didn't understand all the words that Pablo used, but I heard the word vulnerability being mentioned. I also believe that loving what you do is really important. The most daring step I took last year was when I ran out of business cards, and the new set of business cards I actually put lover as an additional role on my business cards, because that's something that I do. I'm not like available for paid love, at least not in that sense, but I love people, I love organizations, and I do love your potential into existence, if you let me. That's something I do. I would like to give you a chance to check your current awareness. You've been sitting in this dark or fairly dark auditorium for 2 hours not doing anything. You've had a chance to do something in a break, to move, to get water or food or anything that you needed. This is just a silent exercise, so you don't need to change, you don't need to share anything. It's just about reflection. There are 3 questions. Each of the questions asks you to give a number on a scale from 1 to 10. And the first question is, how present and engaged are you right now? 10 meaning you would really, really like to jump, and whatever your method of engaging is. Some people don't like jumping, but like very present, very engaged, and this thing is not my own, so I'm... okay, that's the question. How present and engaged are you right now? 0 would be you're almost asleep, or somebody who doesn't know you well might think you are asleep or almost dead. So 1 to 10, how present and engaged are you right now? Second question, also on a scale of 1 to 10, how much risk are you willing to take this morning? 10 meaning you don't care anything. You would replace me immediately if I asked you to. 0 like you wouldn't really like to be seen, and if anybody identified you as a member of this audience, that might already be too much. Last question, third question on a scale of 1 to 10. How much do you care for the experience of others in this room? 10 being maybe even more than your own, and 0 like, what the fuck, I'm here, I paid, I'm going to listen to everything I can. The invitation now is that you remember those numbers, and through the course of the talk, maybe through the course of the day, you reflect again and you notice if they change. And if they changed, you ask yourself, oh, what happened? Why am I now willing to take more risks? Why am I now less engaged? Why do I now care more for the other's experience? Whatever it is, just notice and try to learn something from it. So, we've been talking about impact, or hearing about impact, making a difference this morning. And one of the things that, or one of the ways that you could summarize this lovely BBC project, where they dumped 75 billion British pounds into the dumpster and didn't create any lasting value, but thought they were creating value all the time, is there's a difference between good intentions and good outcome. And I'm assuming that as product owners or people who are interested in product development, you've made that experience at some point in your life already. One thing that many people say is the core of this thing we call agile is that we are improving with an intention. You could improve by just falling down, trying to get up again and trying to stumble ahead, or just occasionally running into walls and then trying something else. That's not really deliberate improvement. What we're trying is, we try to improve with an intention. Another thing that I like is, building on this impact idea of Goiko, is that when we take responsibility, or when we do anything, we're looking at what difference are we making, and how is that difference that we make related to the intention? How is the difference we're making related to the difference we want to make? This, to me, is leadership. That I make a difference and I want to make a difference. Taking responsibility is kind of a flip side. And we put both together. When we improve how we're making a difference, and we're making a difference with intention, and we're improving our intention, then we get to something that you could call agile leadership. For the sake of this talk, I called it agile plus impact. So if this BBC version of agile, we make up what we are creating as we go along, and in the end we discover, ooh, we wasted so much money and we didn't really make a difference. That agile with an impact, and that, in my honest opinion, that shouldn't be, we shouldn't need to add that. Agile should be with an impact. So my definition of agile would be, we make a positive difference and we make it with an intention and we're improving how we do that. So what I would like you to get from this talk is a very specific awareness and a very specific method for how you're going to do that, starting tomorrow and noticing the impact next Monday, ideally. I believe that as leaders, and product owners are leaders in my opinion, because they take a lot of responsibility, leaders need a clarity of intent, of what we want. They need a clarity of reality. We need to understand where we are. There's a clear relation to this GPS, turn-by-turn navigation thing that Goiko loves so much, and I like it too. And we need to have a clarity of choices. I loved his example of, we probably didn't use all the available streets in this neighborhood, but some of us might have used several streets because we took turns and we made choices. And being aware of how we make choices, for instance, we may choose to look at our phone instead of where we're going, and then we might end up somewhere where we didn't want to be. Then we choose a different app, we look on the phone again, and we direct towards the actual goal or the actual target, and then we make a new choice, correct our way, and then we've used a different street to end up in this conference. So being aware of these choices and relate them to the reality we see, relate them to the intention that we have. Does that make sense? Okay. So, when we look at intentions, you came, I assume, is anybody not here because they want to? Just checking. So, I'm assuming you are here because you made a choice. Is that true? Okay. So, what difference do you want this talk to make? What impact are you expecting? Why are you investing an hour of your fucking life to sit here and listen to me? Or potentially even contributing to what we're doing? Any idea? Learn something. What something is that going to be? Ideas for your work. Okay. If you get ideas for your work and if you are going to learn something, what difference is that going to make? Why are these slides advancing without me clicking anything? It's okay, it's not bad, but So what difference does learning, what difference do ideas make? Change behavior. You listened this morning. Thank you. So how will you know that your behavior has changed next week? Give me an example of a changed behavior that might be an indicator of a good experience in this talk. Okay. Can someone give me an example of a beneficial behavior that you would see next week that might be a result of this talk? Tell a story. Cool. Yeah? What difference would that make? If next week at work you share this story of a BBC, what difference would that make? What's the impact of that? What possibility does it create? Awareness. And what difference does awareness make, Pablo? Ooh, it's learning all the way down, right? Yes? We can share our learning? This loop is not a joke, by the way, right? Are you familiar with systems thinking, systems theory, causal loop diagrams? So if you create a beneficial loop of awareness, sharing of stories, people learning something that grows the awareness, and then more people are aware of what's going on, that's a beneficial loop that's going to improve your organization. Several people are nodding. It's total bullshit what I'm saying. So how do you know this is beneficial? What's the difference such an awareness loop would make? You avoid doing something. What would you want to avoid doing? Waste. So if we avoid waste, that's avoid waste. That's something a finance guy would pay for, right? Or at least we could imagine a few more steps of how that could demonstrate actual value. So the guy, the controller who was checking on this BBC project, if he had seen that the 75 billion pounds would have actually, million pounds? I think it was million, not billion, million pounds. If they had actually made a difference in terms of avoiding waste in the organization, that would have been an actual benefit. What else could such a learning loop, what other difference could such a learning loop make? Evaluate, so, okay, yeah. Evolution, yeah, change the way we work. Change, I hope, in terms of improve. And the interesting thing about change is, especially when we change the way we work, we never know it's an improvement unless we measure it. My honest understanding of how Agile works in the industry at the moment is that 90-something% of stuff that we do fails. And it fails because we never decide in advance why we're doing it and how we're going to know. And if you're taking one thing away from this talk is do not ever do anything again before you know how you're going to measure the impact. And it can be a small thing, like sharing a story next week. That's something that you can measure, each of you, right? So count the number of stories from this day that you're sharing next week, and then go back a week later and ask the people you shared the story to tell you if it made a difference. And build this awareness. So what I would like to achieve in organizations is something that I call strategic awareness. And when I say strategic awareness, that means that everybody in the organization knows how the thing that I'm doing now is contributing to the success of the organization. And when I'm done with my thing, and I look at my to-do list of 75 other things I could be doing, I can make a good choice of choosing the next thing that's making an impact on this strategy. You might have heard of the moon landing project, when the United States decided they would go for the moon. Kennedy had this amazing speech, we're going to bring a man to the moon and back. And then like 1 million people were involved in this, and it was a huge, huge, huge success, as we all know. And one story that I specifically like was that somebody, I don't actually know who that was, but somebody was walking through these offices in Cape Canaveral late at night, and they were seeing somebody who was cleaning the floor. And they were asking him, why are you cleaning the floor? It's like totally after hours, nobody's here anymore. And we need to make this rocket land on the moon. So the person cleaning the floor had the strategic awareness how their work was related to the success of the project. And in that specific setting, the success of the nation. And that creates engagement and creates motivation. It eliminates waste, in my understanding. So that's something that I would like to get to. So, that's the wrong clicker. That's the one that's not even working at all. So I would like to introduce you to a thing that I call plan, but spelled differently. And it works like this. You create 3 time horizons. One is uncomfortably soon, like next week. One is reasonably soon, like mid-February, so like let's say mid-March. And then this might be July. So when we're thinking about this conference and the impact that it's making, the PLN, by the way, I stole that from Terry Pratchett. Anybody of you reads fantasy literature? Do you know the book, The Hat Full of Sky, Terry Pratchett? Okay, so Rob Anybody is a Scotsman, this high, very, very brutal warrior kind of guy, and he's learned how to write with a pencil that's to him this big. And the first 3 things that he manages to write with his big pencil is the letters PLN, and then he says, now we've got a plan, we just need to figure out what to do. And I read that and I was laughing, and then I was thinking, this is exactly what agile plans should be. They shouldn't prescribe what people need to do, but they should give all the information that everybody can figure out what's useful to do. So I took that as a label for this kind of plan. So what's going to populate this flip chart very soon, and I'm going to ask for volunteers, there are post-its here and some markers, is okay, it's not the clicker. Okay, wait for it. So what I want here is evidence of impact. I want outcomes. And what I do not want, because that's what every other plan has, is actions. So evidence next week that this conference was a success, evidence by mid-March that this impact is actually making progress. So what you could say is, when we take the post-its, you could have something here that's an indicator that something is starting. Later, something is progressing. And even later, something might be a success. So looking at our story example, so next week you could share the story of the BBC with 3 people. And by mid-March, that could be 25 people. So it's a link here. And then by July, somebody has killed a project because it's waste. That would be great, right? Assuming somebody kills a multiple 100,000 euro project in your company just because you spend, how expensive is this conference? A few hundred euros, right? Somebody spent a few hundred euro for your ticket, you spend a day, you were actually listening for 5 minutes during that day, and that saves your company a few 100,000 euro. Pretty cool, right? Or you have removed an unused feature, not from your backlog, from your software. because you've listened to Goiko. Does that make sense? That's impact planning. So I have no idea what these slides are going to do, but I do have a timer that's still working, so I know I have still about 15 minutes. So I would like a few of you to come up here, pick some Post-its, and practice with me, because what I learned about this method is the difficult thing is coming up with things that are actual outcomes, actual evidence, and not just rewritten actions. What I'm inviting you to do later, but this is not something you can do in a conference talk, and it's not something you can do well together, because most of you will come from different companies, but look at this for your product. What difference do we want our product to make? What difference do we want the next release to make? What difference do we want this feature to make? And think about the things that Goiko said. Do we have variation here? Actually, this is not good to write on Post-its. I'll do a different color here. Do we have variation? Do we have examples of selection? Checking your attention, do you see the example of selection on the flip chart? Where is it? That was the example that Goiko gave for selection, that we kill things that don't work. And the third one was variety, selection, and does anybody remember the third thing that he said that should be in your backlog? Survivability. So this is a nice example. Would we survive killing this project? We need to kill it in a way that we survive it. If we have 100 people on this project and they're all totally frustrated and they will be stressed and get depression and burn out and quit their jobs, that's not good. So we need to make a plan that includes survivability here. Okay, can we have a few people who come here for 5 minutes and help me create something that is more of a plan for you of the impact that you want this day to make, that you want this conference to make? I could volunteer somebody if you don't. Yeah, cool, awesome. Yes, so there are markers, there are Post-its, and start writing or start talking to somebody. This is the moment where you might remember your preference. If you like writing for yourself better, so I'll stop talking very soon. Or if you can step up here, you can stand there. It doesn't hurt you. Or at least I didn't find any way that standing here physically hurts. It's just embarrassing because everybody looks at you. People tell me you get used to it over time. I didn't yet. So let's give these guys a minute to think. And you can use that time to think about, whom do I need to invite into a conversation to have this, to create such strategic awareness thing with my colleagues for my product? And if you're not in product development and you're just here because it says Agile on the cover, then think about your Agile transformation or any strategic thing that your company does. I added one that's totally independent from any talk. This morning before he started his keynote, Goiko told me or showed me very briefly a tool that he's currently developing, which is the thing where you can write a text and it creates a video. and it sounded really amazing. Do you remember the name of the tool? Video Puppet. It's not quite done, but there's a website and a beta. And it looked like some, like an, yeah, go ahead. So share methods with my team. That's an action. What difference does this make?
Awareness.
Awareness? Awareness is very, very general, and you can't measure awareness. So what behavioral difference would you see in your team when you share, or would you want to see when you share this?
They, I guess, like request me or ask more questions.
Cool.
Feedbacks.
So they ask you questions. That's an impact, and that's something that you can measure, right? They ask me questions. More examples? Whatever.
Yeah, the second one, I say like, oh, for example, they ask me a question, and then I convince my CEO to give a talk.
Mm-hmm. Okay, because people are interested, you get to talk in your company, so you can share the ideas with more people. What difference would that make? So if you gave that talk, again, this is an action. So try not to write down actions, try to write down impact, and I explain why in a minute. Yes. That's why we avoid this, right? One of the things I tweeted from Goiko's talk is people define what they can measure as value because they think they can't measure the value, and I think that's wrong. We can measure the value.
Yeah. Measure if people start on their own or to look for things.
Yeah. People start on their own. And we don't need to be overly specific now or overly exact. These are just inspirations for you to take away. What do you have? Can you come up? Oh, you get invited to TEDx. Wow, cool, awesome. Is that next week or when?
The first step is writing about today.
Oh, you write an article? Okay, that's a task. So. Oh, your article gets 100 million likes. Yeah. Okay, I get that. And then you get, okay, cool. So we could, for the next week things, a task-like thing is okay, but I would like you to write the impact. So if you write the article, and maybe 2 or 3 of your friends give you feedback and say it's great, that would already be an impact. I love it. So, Pablo, do you have an active measurement of how many people attending your conferences later get invited to TEDx because of the amazing conference here? Yes? That was not the question, but it's still a very, very good answer. It's okay. I was making fun of you, and everybody else got the point. So, conversation with my boss about rules for feature selection. Cool. What's the impact of that conversation going to be? New rules in place, facts over opinions. Oh, wow, that sounds dangerous. Decrease drama about prioritization. Oh, that would be cool, right? Build the right things. Yeah. In my leadership classes, one topic that people have this really much interested in is how do we make decisions? How do we make decisions in big groups, and how do we make decisions when authority is supposed to change and things like that? And I say, as long as you are still believing that to be an interesting problem, you're not an agile organization, because if you are an agile organization, you just experiment. You don't have any drama around prioritization or decision-making anymore, because you're trying new things all the time. And you will easily agree to do this today, because you can agree to do something else tomorrow, having more information. More things? Let's do 1 more minute, and then finish this. No problem. If we have any great example. create a pilot sprint with these criteria, these being?
These being the consequences of that. People starting on their own, they start
Ah.
to have a pilot sprint to implement the rules like shared on July.
Oh, this was here, right. Okay, cool. So when you practice this with people, the most important thing you need to take care of is what I did now, is asking this, what difference does that make? What difference does that make? What difference does that make? And build this awareness and make that a part of your conversations. If you started every meeting with the question, what difference do you want this meeting to make? And let everybody go who doesn't have an answer. As you have an answer, you ask, and what is your contribution to this difference going to be? And if they don't have an answer, they can leave. And then people can start doing something useful. If you measure at the end of the meeting, did we make this difference? Well, not yet. We have good intentions. Okay, when are we going to measure it? How are we going to measure it? How are we going to know that the things we're doing now will have the impact that we're looking for? And that means you need to be clear about the intention and you need to be clear about measuring the difference. Otherwise, it's just like talk, right? It's fig leaf agile. We're pretending to be improving. We're pretending to, right? That's exactly where the 75 million went. People had good intentions. I'm sure that all of these managers who, when you read this article, it sounds really condescending. It sounds as if these people were dumb. I'm very sure these people were not dumb. I'm sure these people very responsibly, every month, wrote their report. Hey, we've achieved this, we've achieved this, we've achieved this. And from their limited perspective at the time, everything they did sounded like a really great idea. But they didn't connect it to something that was actually important. And that's the thing that we're missing. And product owners are the key people in organizations to make that a thing. And I wrote the key criteria here. This is kind of the meat of this method, or the aubergine if you're a vegetarian. Rolling planning. So just doing this once is not enough. You need to come back next week. And what this does is it creates this strategic awareness that I mentioned before, if you keep doing it. And it changes the disposition of your system. If you have only evidence here, if you have only outcomes, if you have no actions, there's no to-do. There's just a lot of people in the organization who pay attention to what they want to have happen, to pay attention to what's beneficial. And what happens to your own behavior when you pay attention to good things? You do more good things, because you're paying attention to that. And you know that everybody else is paying attention to it too. So what you're changing is, you're changing the probability that good things happen in your organization. And that's magical. If you get there, if you have a coalition of people who are actively contributing to building this awareness of what's actually valuable, what's actually useful, what's actually the difference we're looking for, then you will make big change step by step. One more thing. So I would like you to do this with your product, as I said. And the important question that I took from Goiko's talk, and I had the pleasure of hearing this talk in November already, and I knew he would come again, so I had this opportunity to cheat and build this into my talk. What are the areas in which we want to make a difference? So when you look at, we want to make money, right? Does anybody work for a project that doesn't want to make money here? It's possible. So what does your project make? Okay. Okay. So could we agree to call this like increasing the common good? I think one thing that I wrote in my abstract for this talk is make this world a better place for our grandkids. It doesn't need to be about money. And it should be more specific than just this, because this is something that you can sell anything under, right? Money as well. But being more specific, so we had these 3 things, and I want to write them down again. Variability, survivability, and selection. What else? What else do you want to increase? What other kinds of difference do you want to make with your work, with your product? Learning, yes. Thinking about this road map, streets thing. When you look at your backlog and you look at the top 10 items, I would ask you, me as an external coach consultant, I would ask you, is there at least one element where learning is more important than value? And is there at least one element that you're either not going to do as you learn more about your product, or you're going to kill because it's not working? So is there any one thing in your top 10 items that's a daring experiment, where you don't know if it's going to be valuable? And if that's not the case, then it's not a backlog. Then it's just a list of things that somebody told you to do. Does that make sense? What else? Mm-hmm. If you are interested in quality, one thing that I really, really recommend, there's another Goiko thing. There's a pyramid of different levels of quality a product can make. Like there's a quality of it works, there's a quality of it's usable, there's a quality of it's useful, there's a quality of it's valuable, which is very, very related to what we're doing here. So pyramid quality Goiko should give you a link. I'm not sure of the exact title, but if you Google this. What else? Yes. In my initial list it said fun, but motivation is great as well. Before we run out of time, I think all of what's on the slide is on this flip chart as well. Tying this back to the other graphic I had at the beginning, this I thing, what do you want to work on when you want to lead something, when you take responsibility for something? And there'll be more about this in my workshop this afternoon, is you need to know who you are, identity, you need to know what you want, intention. We've talked a lot about that in this half hour. And you need to develop relationships, most of all the relationship between your users and your product. It's probably the most important relationship you need to develop as a product owner. You need to manage contexts in which these relationships can develop, and you need to nurture growth of your team, nurture growth of your product, nurture growth of your user base, etc., etc. Tiny bit of advertising. In July, I will come back to Paris to run one of my leadership trainings. If you can't wait until July, the next one is going to be in Helsinki. I do online coaching and interesting business development stuff. You can reach me. I'll be here all day and all night. And that's it. Thank you.